Hey, welcome back to Sam Radio. All you Meds, I got something else here, a little different. It's a DX60, same as the other ones I've had. But this is the only thing different. It has CB instead of air. This is like the only flaw in this radio. It has a little dent in here on the screen or on the speaker. But either than that, this thing picks up like a champ. But we'll get something here in a minute. Here, hold on a minute. Stand by.
On eastern United States plus Canada, Bermuda, Greenland, and Iceland on 93.95 kilohertz. In the western United States, western Canada, and Mexico on 59.50 kilohertz. And in central, south, southeast, and western Asia on 75.70 kilohertz. And on podcast on audible.com, Google Podcast, iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, and more. Supreme Master Television is also available in African communities worldwide on Habale TV, in Bolivia on Rep TV, in Potosi on UHF Channel 75, Coltap Channel 71, and Tigo Hogar Channel 15, in Sucre on Cotet Analog Channel 40, Digital Channel 141, in La Paz on Cotel Digital Channel 13.2, in Gayagua on Reflejo CATV Channel 25, in Uyuni on TV Frontera Channel 45, in Villazon on GoTV Channel 5, in Tupista on Channel 4, in the New Department on Trinidad TV, Blocktel Channel 70 and 19. In Brazil on Channel 14 on Max Cloud TV, Channel 211 on CDN TV, Channel 811 on Brazil Play Spain, and on Soul TV, as well as in Mato Grosso do Sul on Channel 94, on Ligne de Cuiabá, and in Campos dos Goitacazes, Rio de Janeiro on UAU Net, in Morro da Liberdade, Villa Buriti, Colonial de Beira Machado, Aparecida, Petropolis, and the Industrial District on Mega LPTVS Channel 98, in the state of Amazonas on TV1, and nationwide on Max Cloud TV Channel 215. Sucre, Cordoba, Mompox, Bolivar Department, Santa Ana.
Alumni Association. There are over 200,000 learner guides in Ghana, in Zimbabwe, in Zambia, in Malawi, and in Tanzania. And they are all supporting the girls in school, making to instruct learners to learn about science or maths. That will not work in the future. So what we have seen is that there are interesting tools now being developed. Our laureates have developed what they call the PhET simulation. And the PhET simulation is an online tool that allows the learner to visualize what is going on in a typical science experiment, figure out how things work, and they can actually also illustrate their learning by using the simulation together with their teacher. And a very interesting thing is that a typical learner in the traditional lecture setting
in the depth of his child. The second stage is what is called as preventative. For those who are always on the edge of sin.
Time. Please visit suprememastertv.com/schedule. Also, be sure to follow us on our socials: YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Nico, Pinterest, Reddit, TikTok, Truth Social, Tumblr, Twitter, and VK in multiple languages.
Today's news, Kiribati received crucial supplies amid extreme drought. Dangerous effects
That
of
weird
rising
noise in
water
there.
temperatures on larger fish people. New research in the United States shows music potentially slows dementia progression in seniors. British woman spreads positivity through streets of London with her
Las voces más altas de la poesía, no solamente cubana. Me atrevo a decir que de la poesía en lengua española, gracias a la perfección y la finura de su estilo, alternando entre el purismo y el realismo, Cultivó ambas tendencias con igual destreza y aunque popularmente se le conoce más por la
household water, sanitation, hygiene and dignity kits containing items such as water purification tablets, buckets, soap, portable water field test kits, and medications. A prolonged drought affecting 119,000 people has occurred due to below average rainfall in Kiribati. UNICEF and the WFP have joined forces to ensure that drought victims, particularly children, have access to safe drinking water and adequate sanitation services to help prevent waterborne disease infections. Thank you, UNICEF, WFP, and PHAS. May the people of Kiribati soon enjoy plentiful rains as we pray all climate-related disasters will end soon by humanity adopting the vegan lifestyle in God's benevolent radiance.
Dutch researchers find large fish people more prone to experiencing oxygen deficiency due to warmer waters and pollution. A recent study from Radboud University in the Netherlands found that larger people from the fish kingdom are less tolerant to oxygen-depleted waters than smaller ones. It was also seen that saltwater species are more sensitive to decreased oxygen levels than freshwater fish individuals, and those with larger biological cells were more affected as well. The goal of the study was to find which aquatic species would be more at risk from the habitat changes caused by global warming and the contamination of waters. Such concerning news,
Global
researchers
warming.
from
Come on, give me
Radboud
a break.
University
It's all
on the
fake.
dangerous effects of rising water temperatures on our fish people co-inhabitants. In the wisdom of the providence, may humanity
couple of years. And I think adaptability right now is a very important, competency for the so if we usually is good, they have very good.
Lucero, el hipnótico amor de las mareas. Nube y brisa. No soy el ogro que escupió en su agua, ni el túntano que robó sus monedas. No soy el que frecuenta aquella casa Cita es cuál.
Hasta la próxima.
de las paredes, los burdeles y de los cementerios. Todo, menos aquella que se oculta bajo una seca máscara de esparto. Todo, menos la carne que procura voluptuosos anillos de serpiente, ciñendo mi espiral.
Another reason people really want to have this kind of regulation, we want to influence equity and the fairness for the education.
So to go with a level playing field and to take away some of the stress. I know it's early days, but it seems like it's making children a lot happier, but it's making parents more stressed.
Yes, that's true. When the new thing comes out, people really don't know how to deal with it at the beginning. Like, it seems like, oh my God, like, problem they have different criteria. And also, if everybody, they have no extra work for the people to select, to choose, which means they really don't know how to show demonstrable kids are great and better than the other students. So how they can plan it, and how they can, prove that their kids are very unique. That is makes people panic and also upset. So some people will chase some special chickens or some other resources. But actually, for the time being, it is true. But gradually, I think people will know there is no one way to as the cut off for all the people to say how your kids are great or not.
Now, China's a very big place, and as you mentioned, incredibly diverse. So what can China do to
así como un botiquín para primeros auxilios. Compre alimentos en Asegúrese de tener dinero efectivo a mano. Tenga al menos una muda de ropa, zapatos y una manta de dormir para cada miembro de la familia. Reúna los artículos especiales para bebés, ancianos o familiares con discapacidad. Es su mejor porque nosotros los socialistas que estamos en control de los demócratas, que estamos en control, sabemos cómo gobernar. Y los republicanos.
¿Qué tal, amigos? Y bienvenidos a otro episodio, capítulo de Arcoíris. This is edition NWS 705 for release on Sunday, August 28, 2022. On the program today, American radio stations in New Zealand, Part 2. Unusual radio antennas, Part 3. And our Australian DX report from Bob Padula. Just 3 weeks ago here in Wayscan, we presented the story of a medium wave station in New Zealand, 1ZM in Auckland, 1 kilowatt on 1250 kilohertz, that was on loan in 1944 to United States personnel for the broadcast of their own American-style programming. Before station 1ZM became available, American programming was carried by both government radio networks in New Zealand via stations with call signs in the YA and ZB series. Among the programs noted by local listeners were news, sports, and musical programs, including the American Command Performance, and the local New Zealand version of the same program under the name Kiwi Command Performance. Right, and now in Wayscan today, we present additional interesting information about American radio stations in New Zealand back during that same World War II era, and also subsequently. Here's Ray Robinson.
Thanks, Jeff. It was in May 1942 that the first contingent of American servicemen, Navy personnel, arrived in New Zealand, and their first responsibility was to build an American naval base in Auckland, together with a shortwave communication station. Back at that stage, with the rapid increase of Japanese victories in the islands of the Western Pacific, American strategy called for an American naval base in New Zealand to serve as their naval headquarters in the South Pacific. Initially, the American Navy was granted shared usage of Auckland radio ZLD, up until work was completed on their own shortwave communication radio station, which was granted a New Zealand call sign ZLK. The ZLK transmitter station was built at the junction of St John's Road and St Heliers Bay Road, some 4 miles southeast of downtown Auckland. A dozen tall masts were erected to support the shortwave antenna system at station ZLK, which was the only communication station in New Zealand that was operated by American personnel during World War II. The receiver station was installed at St Heliers Bay, about 10 miles distant. However, subsequent war history demonstrates that fortunately, the Americans didn't need a naval base in New Zealand after all, so they abandoned it in 1944 and donated it to the New Zealand government. Station ZLK was soon afterwards taken into various forms of government communication usage. Interestingly, 2 years later, in 1946, The young international radio monitor Jim Burfield at Strathalbyn in South Australia heard this same station with official messages on behalf of the Auckland Central Police. He received a brief QSL letter acknowledging his reception of the station as heard on 1680 kHz under the call sign ZLK2. However, some 30 or 40 years later, there was another American communication station at another location in New Zealand, and that was noted on the air under the same call sign ZLK. That new ZLK was located near the airport in Christchurch on the South Island, adjacent to the local airport communication station at suburban Weedens. The receiver station was 7 miles distant, right near the airport itself. The second ZLK was constructed under the American project in Antarctica that was identified as Operation Deep Freeze Antarctica in order to provide shortwave communication between North America and the Antarctic mainland. This ZLK contained half a dozen 10 kilowatt shortwave transmitters that were in operation at about 4 kilowatts due to their age. This station was no longer needed when satellite communication became available. Then some 20 years ago, the Americans installed 2 very large radar stations in the South Pacific, one in Tasmania and another in New Zealand. These 2 radar stations were launched under the project name Tiger Radio, and they were established for the security of the southern areas of the South Pacific. The Tasmanian station is located off the east coast on the small Bruny Island, and the New Zealand station is located near Invercargill at the southern tip of the South Island. Back to you, Jeff.
Thank you very much, Ray. And before you leave us today, in our program we want to present our third batch of unusual radio receiving antennas, some of which date way back almost 100 years. In 1925, for example, an unusual experiment was conducted, we presume in the United States, in which the exhaust gas from an airplane engine was used as the receiving and transmitting antenna.
Yes, Jeff. As the news item in Radio News for June 1925 states, the exhaust gas from an aircraft engine is at a very high temperature, which is heavily ionized, and it can therefore be used to conduct electricity. The experiment was considered to be successful, and the procedure was granted a patent. Over the years, there have been many tests to determine the value of an underground antenna system for the reception of radio signals. In 1927, for example, 3 consecutive issues of the then popular American radio magazine Radio News, actually the August, September and October issues, carried information regarding experiments with underground radio antennas. The purpose of these experiments was to determine the possibility of eliminating static that was often evident in the reception of medium wave programming. The Radio News article in 1927 suggested digging a hole 3 feet in diameter and 4 feet deep and burying a coil of copper wire in the hole. A lead-covered wire connected the buried copper coil to the receiver. According to the advocate of this procedure, Professor Dr. James H. Rogers of Hyattsville, Maryland, unwanted static is almost completely eliminated. Another similar procedure suggested by Dr. Rogers was to place a long wire horizontally in a shallow trench, and then place a metal screen over the antenna wire, though the metal screen does not touch the antenna wire. This experimental procedure, which was also granted a patent, also eliminates most of the static, he declared. 2 other radio men, Mr. J.A. Proctor of Lexington, Massachusetts, and the well-known Frank Conrad of KDKA fame, experimented with the use of 2 out-of-phase receiving antennas of different heights. Both antennas were connected to the same receiver through a complicated system of transformers, and in this way, they claimed, static was reduced. Another advocate for the reduction of static also patented his procedure, and that was to insert a resistor between the antenna and the receiver, though as he discovered, the signal strength of the received signals was also reduced. Then there were 2 men in England, G.A. Morris and B.C. Stevenson, who had a different idea, which they also patented. They suggested that the receiving set should have 2 earth connections, one the normal earth connection, and the other an antenna, not erected above the ground, but rather buried in the ground. We should also add that amateur radio operator Clem Small, KR6A, experimented with buried antenna systems many years later, during the year 2001. According to his information, as published in the now inactive American radio magazine Monitoring Times, in the December 2001 issue on page 78, the same variety of receiving antennas that are in use above the ground can also be designed and buried beneath ground level. Although reception levels are reduced, he states that underground antenna systems are easier to install than the above ground level variety. Interestingly, back in the early radio era, many radio operators advocated that their antennas should be polished, preferably every week or two. In this way, it was suggested dust and grime are removed from the aerial wire, thus granting better radio reception, they said. That quote was from another now inactive American radio magazine, Popular Communications, the September 2006 issue on page 23. Back to you, Jeff.
Thank you very much, Ray. Ray Robinson there at KVOH in Los Angeles. Now we want to finish our report on frequencies from Radio Free Asia for the 822 broadcast period. We picked up this schedule when we were at Radio Free Asia for the NASB conference last month. And today we have frequencies in Tibetan and Uyghur. And you can report these transmissions to Radio Free Asia at rfa.org, and they will send you a very nice Radio Free Asia QSL card. So here are transmissions in Tibetan. 0100 to 0200 UTC on 9370, 9510, 9705, 11850, and 17670 kilohertz. 0200 to 0300 UTC on 9380, 11850, 11745, and 17670 kilohertz, as well as a frequency that's not promoted due to jamming. 0600 to 0700 on 15720, 21690, and one other frequency that's not promoted. 1000 to 1100 UTC on 13860, 15330, and one not promoted frequency. 1100 to 1200 UTC on 13580, 15265, 15460, and 17640. 1200 to 1300 UTC on 11570, 13580, 15460, 17690, and 17860. 1300 to 1400 UTC, also on 5 frequencies, 11570, 13835, 15275, 15460, and 17860 kilohertz. 1500 to 1600 UTC on 9355, 11975, and one other frequency that's not promoted. And 2200 to 2300 UTC on 7505, 9380, and one not promoted frequency. Finally, 2300 to 2400 UTC on 5950, 9555, and 11700 kilohertz. Those are transmissions in Tibetan from Radio Free Asia. And finally, in the Uyghur language, 100 to 200 UTC on 9350, 9780, 9800, 11640, and 11790. And 1600 to 1700 UTC in Uyghur on 9355, 9480, 11675, and 15625 kilohertz, as well as one frequency that's not promoted due to jamming. Frequencies there for Radio Free Asia you can go online to rfa.org, click on Contact, and it will explain where to send your reception reports to get a QSL card from Radio Free Asia. Now let's go to Bob Padula in Melbourne with his Australian DX report.
Welcome to another edition of the Australian DX report. This is Bob Padula in Melbourne, Australia, bringing to you our latest roundup of news concerning shortwave broadcasting stations around the world. We include information concerning the propagation reports, monitoring information, solar activity news, schedule information, and other items of interest to shortwave monitoring enthusiasts. A reminder that all times we give in these programs are in UTC, also known as GMT, and all frequencies are in kilohertz. Full detailed QSL cards are available for correct system reports received for the Australian DX report. The address will be given at the end of the program. So now, here is this week's news. The first item this time concerns the Defence Advanced Research Project Agency, commonly known as DARPA, originating in the USA. The organisation has issued the first call for proposals for its EUREGA program, which aims to use sensors on near-Earth satellites, that's VLEOS, to gain new insights into the propagation of high-frequency shortwave radio waves in the ionosphere. Due to the high density of charged particles, signal propagation in the ionosphere is difficult to predict. Continuous monitoring of the ionosphere in situ, i.e. right on the spot, would for the first time allow near real-time predictions. The High Frequency Committee of the IARU Region 1, that's the Western Hemisphere, will continue to follow the topic closely and report on it. And this information came from the IARU Region 1 website, so interesting news there. The solar activity from the Ionospheric Prediction Service, government organisation here in Australia from Sydney. Solar activity has shown no significant flare events. There are currently no significant sunspot groups on the visible solar disk, and there have been no significant Earth-directed CMEs observed recently. The solar wind speed in early June was mostly steady, varying from 306 to 339 kilometres per second, mildly elevated after a day or so. There is a possibility of a weak CME impact early in mid-June, which may slightly elevate wind parameters on the same day. Solar flare activity is expected to be predominantly at the RO level, possibly increasing shortly in the immediate future. There also appears to be a solar region behind the southeast limb of the Sun, which is likely to rotate onto the disk in coming days. Now the forecast, the 10.7 centimetre solar radio flux, 100 is the latest indicator, and the daily smooth sunspot number is now holding at between 48 and 54. The smooth sunspot number will increase slightly in the immediate future, with a 10.7 centimetre solar radio flux will also increase slightly to about 105. Those predictions are from the Ionospheric Prediction Service. The forecasts made available from that government department in Sydney here in Australia. In discussing the level of solar activity, you must remember that with the current higher level of activity, propagation on darkness paths on the higher frequencies will be somewhat more impressive, particularly on frequencies above about 10 megahertz. During nighttime periods, of course, during periods of low sunspot activity, there's very little long-distance propagation on those frequencies. So it looks like cycle 24, sunspot cycle 24 may have started, but there's real no specific information in the electronics literature about this having occurred, so we'll keep informed. A note now from the BBC in London, from BBC News. Russia has blocked access to the BBC website, and the media outlet has resorted to broadcasting news bulletins over shortwave radio in the country. According to a report in The Guardian, the BBC said it was bringing back the World War II era broadcasting technology in the region, just hours before its sites were banned. It's often said truth is the first casualty of war. In a conflict where disinformation and propaganda is rife, there is clear need for factual and independent news people can trust. And in a significant development, millions more Russians are tuning to the BBC, said Tim Davey, BBC Director General. We will continue giving the Russian people access to the truth however we can. As part of its resilience operation to ensure news is available in Ukraine and Russia, the BBC has also stepped up services via the platforms. It launched 2 new shortwave frequencies in the region for 4 hours of world service English news each day. These frequencies can be received clearly in the Kiev and parts of Russia. Shortwave radio user frequencies that carry over long distances and are accessible on portable radio sets. The BBC said its shortwave broadcast will be available on the frequencies of 15755, and that's from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. London time, and 5875 from midnight to 2 a.m. Ukraine time. News will be read in English, which the BBC says will be available in Kiev as well as parts of Russia. And that was a report from the BBC News website, which was headed, BBC begins World War II era shortwave broadcast as Russia blocks website. We have some notes from the Bulgarian online organisation known as SWL DX Bulgaria News and DX Mix. So these stations noted mainly during the daylight reception period in Eastern Europe. Transworld Radio, 2WR India, broadcasting in Mundari on 13690 via the Yerevan relay station in Armenia. 1315 to 1330 with 300 kilowatts and the antenna at 100 degrees, intended for Southern Asia. The program is on the Mondays and Tuesdays. Another station of TWR India, broadcasting in Urdu on 13690, also via Yerevan, between 1500 and 1530. 300 kilowatts being 100 degrees antenna to South Asia. Programs are Urdu. Brazil, this episode of Radio Nacional de Amazonia, Portuguese on 11780 via Brasilia. 1110 onwards with 250 kilowatts and the antenna 360 degrees in Portuguese. The antenna is actually intended to support broadcast primarily to Brazil. Reception of the Oramia Public Media Radio Yoni 3 on 15415. So that's a brokered relay station, brokered broadcast by Isidon in France. 1600 to 1630 with 500 kilowatts and the antenna 127 degrees to East Africa in Oromo. Another frequency for Transworld Radio India in the Uyghur language on 11590 via the relay station at Aganya in Guam, that's K2WR. 1400 to 1438. 750 kilowatts and the antenna 305 degrees, and very good reception in Europe Mondays to Thursdays. And then another frequency for Transworld Radio India in Kazakh on 11790 via K2WR relay, 1430 to 1445, 250 kilowatts and 305 degrees to Central Asia. CBAR, Far East Broadcasting Association, Radio Sama in Arabic, heard on 15260 by the Wolferton, England relay station. 1700 to 1800, 250 kilowatts and the antenna 114 degrees to the near Middle East. And good reception in Europe. Reception of Adventist World Radio, AWR in Spanish on 5010 by WRMI, Turkey Shavy, Florida, 1100 to 1130, 100 kilowatts and 181 degrees antenna, broadcasting primarily to Spanish daily. Reception of Radio Prague in Spanish on 5010, also via WRMI, 1130 to 1200, 100 kilowatts and 181 degrees antenna to Central America. We hope you found the broadcast interesting and helpful for your shortwave radio monitoring. Just a reminder that full detailed ADXR QSL cards are available by contacting this address. The URL is simply adxr.org. To get it once again, adxr.org. At that address you'll find all the details about how you may send in a reception report, and you can receive the QSL card via postal mail, that's physical postal mail, or via the internet. So until our next program, this is Bob in Melbourne, Victoria, Australia. Wishing you all good listening, and thanks for being with us. Goodbye for now.
Bliss awaits all who accept Yah's gift of salvation. When Yahushua returns, all who died trusting in his crucified and risen Savior will be raised back to life in the first resurrection.
Si lo ha dispuesto Dios, la naturaleza o el Abo. Nadie tiene el derecho.
When writing, please let us know on which broadcast frequency you receive this program. Scriptures for America Worldwide is an evangelical ministry dedicated to proclaiming the correct gospel of Jesus Christ.
Por decisión y voluntad de los elegidos y quienes una forma se han visto en contacto con la fuente.
fierrito que ya nos encargaron un fierrito, el buen ojo de águila. Cuando ya no lo queríamos, pues lo echamos a torcer. Ahí se lo dejo llegar con el buen Oscar para que se lo pase a la recicladora. Así que échale ganota, Miguel. Y fírmale, por cierto, sigue siendo 4.
There you go, channel 6 with a bunch of blah 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 on there. CB's picking up on this.